Let's look at Luke. It says 6:31, but I want to go back to 6:27. The greatest commandment is love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. As a pastor, I find people that don't love themselves more often than not, so often because we confuse self-love with self-indulgence. Now, we've got to take time to listen to what Jesus says about this. We must love ourselves. So how do we do that? We've been talking about this over the last few weeks. First, we need to wake up to our need to love ourselves, if for no other reason than Jesus said so. Imagine two men. One goes to a job that he hates and eats junk food all day, goes home, eats pizza next to his wife while scrolling through his cell phone and skips any time with God that evening or with his family. Another man does the exact opposite. He has a job that he loves because he went out and he found it. He eats healthy. He goes home and has an actual conversation with his wife and has a brief family devotion. Which of those men is awake? The first man or the second? Now, who's been the second man? Occasionally. Who's been the first one? All too often. Folks, we cannot wander through life. We have to be intentional and wake up. And loving ourselves has to be a priority. Second thing is acceptance. Accept where you are in Jesus Christ right now. That does not mean approve of it, by the way. I think I missed that. Staying asleep spiritually and playing virtual reality with our spiritual life will not lead us to a healthy love of ourselves. We will not win playing that game. And accepting some sin in your life will not work either. Jesus told a story about a man who woke up to the fact that he was a sinner and he went to the temple and he repented. God have mercy upon me, a sinner. If we are to really love ourselves, we must accept ourselves as we really are, not some virtual reality plastic version, not just the bad and dwell on the bad, but also the good, particularly the future. And talking about the future, there is the responsibility part. King David had sinned deeply, but he didn't play the victim, and we shouldn't either. He had to answer for his sin, but he also had a glorious future. He needed to take responsibility and ownership for that. Now, I don't know a single person who refuses to take responsibility for their past and their future, who loves playing the victim, who truly and absolutely loves themselves. It is hard to love yourself when you sin. Yes. Does that make you feel guilty? Yes, it should at some level. But Jesus never meant us to wallow in guilt. What do you think that was for? Jesus came to set us free from guilt and launch us into our future. And that's what we're going to talk about today, kind of. The fourth thing is assertiveness with that future. Many people think, or many times I think, that there's anything, many times I think that if there's anything that I need to learn, it's about being assertive with that future, with who Jesus Christ is making you and me to be. Now notice I did not say authentic with who we are. Authentic with who we are is the battle cry of those who are eager to stay where they are. It is the battle cry of those people who do not want to grow. It is the battle cry of people who want to sit in their used diaper because it's warm. In other words, it is the people who think that God can't do anything else with them, that transformation is impossible. If you want to talk about one of the controversies in the Methodist Church, there it is. You are not those kind of people. We are engaged in the unlimited enterprise of heaven. What is Jesus Christ making you to be? Well, it's a lot of things, but I'll tell you a little bit. It's a people with a mission and a people who are assertive about that mission. And we're going to look here at Luke 6:27. Now listen to this stuff. But if you are willing to listen, Jesus says, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who hurt you. If someone slaps you on the cheek, offer the other cheek also. If someone demands your coat, offer your shirt also. Give to anyone who asks, and when things are taken away from you, don't try to get them back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. This is the word of God for the people of God, and all God's people said.
Thanks be to God.
What is Jesus Christ making us to be? A people with a mission. What is that? Is that the thing on the cover of our bulletin? Yeah. A lot of churches have things like that. They're phrased in a million different ways. But for our purposes today, it's more basic than that. And here it is. Christ is making a new humanity. Christ is making a new humanity. And if you don't believe me, read those words again that Jesus just spoke. Love your enemies. Now keep in mind, Jesus was Jewish. He was talking to a nearly totally Jewish audience. And this pushed back on significant portions of Jewish religious tradition. Matthew 5:43 says, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who hurt you. Jesus is making a new humanity just by the demands of these instructions. He's making a new humanity that does good with no thought of return. And you may sit there and you may think, suckers. Maybe. He's making a new humanity that loves and blesses and prays for the one that hates. And he's praying for the one who hates. Why? Not just without purpose, not just to have some sort of shot of groovy Jesus juice and feel good about himself. He's praying for those who hate because he wants the one who hates to become the one who loves. And Jesus starts with those people that hate and curse and hurt. And those people are not just the folks that were gathered around him in those early days, but also you and me. He was correcting them and correcting us and leading them and leading us into a new way of living. And he is making a new humanity out of anybody that will listen. The cover of your bulletin has a quote from John Wesley. It's put on t-shirts, it's put on the cover of bulletins, it's like carved into wood and put gold gild all over it in England and stuff. It's a famous John Wesley quote. If you don't know who John Wesley was, he was the Holy Spirit-filled catalyst for what history calls the Wesleyan revival. It's the largest and most global revival in the Christian church of the second millennium, and it's still going on. We just don't see it much in North America and Europe. Wesley, however, today we would basically call him a nerd. All right? Wesley was 5'4". He was not the most attractive man that ever walked the earth. He had this kind of funky little bird-like nose. He could be a little demanding. He could be a little too straightforward. He could hold you accountable with some relish. He could not have run a modern multimedia empire. And also, Wesley was a very traditional, high liturgical Anglican clergyman. What does that mean? That means he never looked at his watch, because back then he didn't have them. And he would have run a long, high liturgical worship service, 90 to 120 minutes. Communion offered every single time with that good old 40-proof fortified wine. But Wesley and the people called Methodists had a mission, and I would submit to you that we still have the same today. It was a mission of evangelism and spreading scriptural holiness across the land. In other words, a mission to lead people to love God and love their neighbor as themselves. Problem: the people would not come to Wesley, so Wesley had to go to the people. The church still needs to learn this lesson, folks. There's more garbage in preacher magazines about attracting people to come to your church. Why? The mission of the Church of Jesus Christ is to go. Jesus never says attract. He says go. And to do that, to follow that command to go, Wesley had to preach in the fields. Now, preaching in the fields like that is abhorrent to a high liturgical churchman. It's abhorrent. But when he saw the great crowds of people outside who were eager to hear the gospel, he set propriety and prissiness aside because reaching people was more important. And may the mission of the church always trump prissy propriety. God save us from prissy propriety. Field preaching meant ruffling feathers, folks. And sometimes it was the people that heard the sermon who got their feathers ruffled. Good. A lot of times, ministers themselves gave John Wesley some grief. Because back then, England's churches had set, they still kind of do, had set territory where the minister was assigned to that territory, and he was the one, it was always he back then, who was supposed to minister there and evangelize there. And when Wesley preached in the fields, he was nearly always preaching in somebody else's territory. But field preaching became a key part of Wesley's ministry, and he dealt with it when the prissy people came and said, "You can't do that. They won't do that." That's why Wesley said this. "I look upon all the world as my parish. Thus far, I mean that in whatever part of it I am, I judge it meet and right and my bounden duty to declare unto all who are willing to hear the glad tidings of salvation." What does that mean? That means wherever he was, there he preached. He knew his mission, and he was assertive with it, and he did not tamp it down for fear of being too pushy, or being too offensive, or speaking too loudly, or speaking too strongly. He did not compromise his love of God. He did not compromise his love of neighbor. He knew his mission, and to keep that mission, he loved himself enough. This short, thin, homely little man had to carry his message of salvation to the whole world, and he did. And his theological heirs still do. Wesley knew Christ was making him into something beyond expectations and appearances, a masterpiece. So the question is today, what about you? Will you love yourself like Wesley did? Will you dare to be assertive and authentic in your mission? And if you don't know what it is, will you hunt it down until you find it? I had dinner last night with a friend of mine, and we've been friends for, what year is it?
18.
We've been friends for 28 years. And he's always had jobs. He's always had good paying jobs, but I wasn't quite sure if he was doing what he was supposed to do in his professional life. I knew he was doing what he was supposed to do in his faith life. But his professional life, he's finally found what he's supposed to do. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's not relevant to the sermon. But he's found it, and he is a different human being. It's like the time when he has a gift for worship leading. But he's not meant to be a music minister or anything like that in a church. It's like the time that he found when he was 18 or 19 years old, and I was there when he figured out that he was supposed to be, what was it? I was like, they're not behind me, they're all there. And there's no ghosts in the building. Anyway. There might be. Actually, no, I mixed up some holy water a few years ago and rebuked them all, so they're all gone. Anyway, find your mission, find your purpose. So, how do we love ourselves? Awaken, accept, take responsibility, and be assertive with the future. That person that Jesus Christ is making you to be. And look, as you come up for communion, think about all these things. If you need saving, come to this altar. If you need to commit yourself to Christ for the second time or first time or whatever it is, come to this altar. If there is some mission on your heart, some calling that you have been diluting and tamping down because of a spirit of fear, then in the name of Jesus, spirit of fear be gone. And come to this altar and let that mission be loosed up. If you don't know what the mission is, come. What you are supposed to do is amazing. Some of you may be called to help with our mission with Lincoln Village this summer, helping to renovate that home. Some of you may be called to help out with the missions this fall to Uganda and Mongolia. What is the mission on your heart right now that none of us know about because you've been tamping it down? What future is before you? Will you love God? Will you love your neighbor? And in this context, will you love yourself enough to chase after that? Let's join together in the communion liturgy.